Bonsoir tout le monde. Je m'appelle Marianne. Non, excusez-moi. I've been in Toronto where I have a different name, so I have to get back into my Chicago personality. So I'm going to read my script. Je m'appelle Aimée Laberge et je suis la directrice des programmes à l'Alliance Française de Chicago. So happy to have you with us tonight as we are about to welcome Jane Bertch, the author of The French Ingredient, Making a Life in Paris, One Lesson at a Time. She will be in conversation with Nina Winston, and you are in for a real treat, because this is the story of how a cheeky American who wears gold jeans was able to open a cooking school in Paris. Oh mon Dieu. So I think as the author of My Paris Kitchen, David Lebovitz, said of The French Ingredient, an engaging, multi-layered story of a woman navigating innumerable cultural differences to build a life in Paris and create her dream to establish a French cooking school. Jane's book, as you saw, is on sale, and she will sign it for anybody who wants a signature after the talk. D'accord? But before we get started, and because I see a few new faces and a few faces who have been back after a while, I'm going to do a little pitch, so bear with me, about the Alliance, okay? The Alliance Française de Chicago is over 125 years old and part of an international network of over 800 alliances worldwide. It is the second oldest alliance in the US and the second largest after New York, comme d'habitude. We offer classes for all ages and levels, leading to certification in French for professional purposes or simply for experiencing another language and its various cultures. It also hosts an impressive array of events, as some of you know, bringing notable lecturers to Chicago, as we'll have tonight, authors, filmmakers, directors, winemakers, chefs, designers, historians, actors, and performing artists. As you know, the Alliance Française de Chicago is a not-for-profit organization depending on donors like you. To keep offering those programs. Become a member. You get free admission to many programs like our film screenings. The next one is this Thursday when we show our French women filmmakers create unique comedy. We will be showing Babysitter by Monia Chokri from Quebec, with the wonderful Nick Davis as guest speaker. I see some people here who come to the film screening. He's such a great, he brings so much depth to his comment about the films. It becomes even better. We also, as a member, you'll also get discount on French classes, so you can enjoy Paris even more, or go to Quebec City. My hometown. You also get borrowing privilege at our library. My favorite there, of course, is the Vogue France and the Paris Match, which is a gigantic people magazine. So I also want you to know, I see a lot of you picking our little brochure about the Symposium on the Arts of France. This is one of our spring program, an annual cultural and educational fundraiser with museum quality programs and speaker. There's still 2 talks in the new series about Yves Saint Laurent, his houses, his fashion, and his gardens. On May 15, we have something about fashion, and June 5th, our favorite speaker, Mitch Owens, returned with the head of the Yves Saint Laurent Foundation, and I didn't write his name, so I don't remember it, but he's a big deal. Trust me on this. So tonight, back to tonight, Jane Bertch. She has spent more than 2 decades living and working in Europe. In 2009, she started La Cuisine Paris, which has become the largest non-professional culinary school in France. She holds a baccalaureate in English, a master's degree in labor and industrial relations, that must come handy in France, from the University of Illinois, and an executive master from the French Business School, INSEAD, which I'm sure means something. Very long, Institute of something. The French Ingredient is her first book. It's a memoir, and I'd like to welcome Jane and Nina now. Merci.
Okay. Hello. Bonjour.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, bonsoir. Bonsoir. It's after 5.
So just a few words about Jane. I have been extremely fortunate to be able to celebrate the French Ingredient coming out a little bit here in Chicago with Jane Bertch. And her memoir, The French Ingredient, is full of journeys and lessons that we can all appreciate. And layered in the book through her eyes, you're going to discover or rediscover Paris and its charms and its flavors and what it's really like to make a life there, because that's really what your book is about.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
you know, she's built an amazing career for herself, first in banking, then she did a sharp pivot and founded La Cuisine Paris. And, you know, the other thing I really want you all to know is that Jane is an incredibly thoughtful and dear friend. We met several years ago, and we tried to meet in Paris, and then we didn't. And then we met here in Chicago, where she's originally from. And since then, we've had the chance to connect on both sides of the pond. And it's just been such a joy to help you launch your book. So I really just wanted to say that, and we'll get right into this. So
Before we get going, I just want to say thank you so much. Look at all of these wonderful faces. Despite the scaremongering from the weather reports, I'm so honored to have you here as a part of this. So thank you for being with me tonight.
thank you. And thank you so much to the Alliance, because we really
Yes.
appreciate the opportunity.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah?
Yep. Can you? Can you hear me? Okay. So Chicago,
Yes,
your home.
It
You grew up
is.
here.
it is.
And before you landed in Europe, you lived in Hyde Park.
Yes, spent many years living in Hyde Park.
So the book talks a lot about the fact that you're a Midwesterner, that you grew up in Chicago, you went to Culver Academy in Indiana. You talk a lot about what it's like to be a native Chicagoan and a Midwesterner in terms of sort of cultural differences with Paris and how that all happens. Tell us a little bit about what it means to you to be a Midwesterner in
Yes.
Paris.
So this is something I'm so proud of. I love this great city. I love what I think are Midwest values that I took away. I've been gone for quite a while. I left when I was 3, I should tell you. Very poor joke. But what I took away is that sense of can do, that warm spirit, that welcome, that warm welcome, I should say, that you always get, the ability for human connection. There's nothing finer than sitting at a bar in Chicago, Gibson's I've been to on many occasions, I will tell you that, and just chatting with the person next
Yeah.
door.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen easily in Paris. So I do love that spirit, and it's something I'm quite proud of.
And it's funny because we've talked about this a little bit, but I originally moved to Chicago from New England. And when I came here first from New England about 35 years ago, I was like, why is everybody talking to me all the time? You know? So it's just kind of interesting parallel, right?
Right.
But of course, now I'm one of those people. So there you go. So the book really touches on a lot of different themes that are, I think, very universal in life. And one of them is journeys. Your personal journey, your professional journey. The French Ingredient really follows that from the beginning. And going back to the beginning, your first trip to Paris was not the trip that made you fall in love with Paris, was it?
No, it was not, I must say.
What was it like?
It was the classic trip of 3 days London, 3 days Paris. I don't even remember the London portion because I was so traumatized by my time in Paris. But I guess somewhat in a good way. I was age 17 with my mother. And at age 17, I desperately wanted to fit in. Always been a challenge for a redhead. But somehow I had a few experiences in Paris that let me realize I was very much a visitor. And there is nothing more charming than a waiter looking at you as though you smell when you try to pronounce something in French so horribly. But that was my first experience. And I guess I was meant to come back and love Paris dearly as I do now.
And you did come back, although it was a slightly circuitous route.
Yes, it was.
So you went to college at U of I.
Yes.
And you wanted to work in finance.
Yes.
And how did that happen?
So I was very focused on wanting to work in finance. And that just was so symbolic of many things to me in having achieved a specific career in finance was one of my main goals. So I ended up joining a major American bank and was so excited to move to New York because that's where their headquarters were. I thought, well, now the next thing outside of Chicago is, of course, New York. And then they sent me to Tampa, Florida. So I was there for it was not exactly New York, but you know what? Sometimes we end up on these journeys and we don't know why. And perhaps because of the time in Tampa, they took such pity on me that the next suggestion they had was, why don't you go to London? And that's what took me to Europe back in 2000. So quite a while ago.
And London was great.
London was great. London was great and I loved it.
Had an incredible group of friends. You really settled in and you were working more on the operational side of the bank, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
HR and project management,
HR,
all sorts of stuff like that. But then something happened.
Yes. I had a wonderful, I won't even call him a mentor, but just a wonderful leader who I was working with, who said to me, Jane, I think that you might be good at X. And that was something I had not even identified myself. So how precious is it for all of us to share something wonderful that we see in somebody else that might help motivate them? So it was thanks to him that I ended up pursuing an opportunity in corporate banking for relationship management. And that opportunity, lo and behold, the one that was the best fit was in Paris. So here we are back again to Paris. Okay.
And so now this is Paris 2.0.
This is Paris 2.0.
And it's the early 2000s. And they asked you if you spoke French.
And I totally misled on how much I did speak French. I will completely admit, I thought I did. And then you get to Paris and you're asking yourself, was that a phrase or was that 2 words? Is that a question that they've asked me? So yeah, I did not speak as good as I thought I did.
And you had a formidable boss.
I had a very formidable
and
boss.
In the book, you'll learn a lot about Jean-Paul. And
yes.
He is a fascinating character. And tell us a little bit about his story and how you kind of came to collaborate with him, because it didn't happen overnight.
Did not happen overnight. And I am so incredibly grateful to him because he changed my trajectory. And for me, he is the original maverick. I have come to love and appreciate a sense of structure and hierarchy in professional services in France. I've also come to appreciate, again, the whole book is the world of According to Jane. I've come to appreciate that in higher education, there are few schools. I've come to understand that people grow up together. So that makes it difficult to build a network when they've gone to small school together all the way to the Grande École. So for Jean-Paul to invite me into that world, I hadn't realized how exceptional that was. And that's why I call him the original maverick. Incredibly well respected, really very, very challenging. He could spot a missing comma in a manuscript and focus on how important it is to have perfection in what you do. So
yeah, in the book you talk also about, well, we've talked a little bit about the relationship with time that the French have.
Yes.
And I think that comes out a lot at the table, obviously at dinners and lunches, but business dinners and business lunches too. I mean, what was it like the first time you had to sort of be part of a business event or a business dinner in France? And how did that, what were some of the lessons you learned there?
Oh gosh, well, there's a whole chapter on the mishaps of Jane when it came to some of my first experiences. One of which is in formal dining, please wait to be told where you're going to sit. Your hosts and hostesses think very carefully about who's there and where you might be at the table. I did not know that, and I was starving. So what do? I run to the table, sit down, and realize that everybody is still looking at me. So I hop back up. But it's those fun things like that that I've learned about culture. And well, I'll leave you to enjoy that one section of the book. But needless to say, you'll probably get to the end of it and think, I don't know how she survived, because I managed to do most everything wrong.
Yeah. Well, not everything, because you did pretty well. But one of the other things in the book that really resonated for me, and I think is just an underlying theme in everything, are friendships.
Yes.
And your friendships in France, your friendships in London, your friendships here, and also your relationship with family, but just all those different connection points. And how different it was in France. It wasn't easy to make friends.
Yeah.
And it had a very different feeling to it than other experiences you'd had where you'd always had a lot of friends around. What was that like when you first came to Paris and you didn't know anybody?
Yeah, it was a real challenge for me. And again, my experience was in professional services. Private life and business life in where I was working did not mix. So it was really hard for me to develop some friendships. And it took time. And you mentioned time. And I think that if I were to consolidate, one of the greatest things that I've taken away from my time in France is the respect for time and how important that is and how it should be cherished. When we look at things like the retirement age strike that we just had in France, when you understand the importance of one's time, you can appreciate why people would be upset that their time to enjoy a life after they've worked hard has been pushed forward. You can understand why you will go blue in the face waiting for your bill at a dinner, because that time is sacred and we wouldn't disturb it without you asking. Or why just having a coffee with a friend is precious and we don't need to do it in a paper cup on the street. It should be a moment to connect.
Sure.
So absolutely.
And it took time to make friends. And
yes, took a lot of time to make friends. And I always like to bring up the example, Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince. Has anybody read this book? I know some of you have. So I'm going to pose the same question I posed to everybody. When the little boy says to the fox, let's be friends, what does the fox say? Anyone know? I'm sorry? No, not exactly. If it took place in Chicago, the fox would be like, okay, come over today, let's play. The fox's response is, you have to tame me. So I think that's such a beautiful way to explain some of the cultural differences in getting to know people in France. And to me, that tame is we have to learn about each other. We have to build trust. We have to build confidence. And then that is friendship. And I can tell you, I do, because I work in the tourism market, I do sometimes have to intercept visitors feeling as though that some of the French locals that they've come across are not nice or are not interested. And I explain it has nothing to do with that. You have not built a connection. You're a passerby in the street. But I can tell you, some of my French friends are the most loyal, wonderful, cherished people I have. They have actually become family.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So big pivot.
Yes.
And some big ideas start to happen. You've been in
Yes.
banking now, you're a success, you've kind of made it.
Done well.
And all of a sudden, there's just some other things moving around there. Like, what happened? How did
Yes.
that come to be? And this is sort of the beginning in the book of the idea around La Cuisine Paris. Where did the idea come from, and where were you, and what was going on?
Perfect. So you'll read about it all in the book, but the summary is I was at a career point doing really well. And I was so proud that I'd gotten there. And I'd frankly spent all of my life trying to get there. And then because of some family situations that reminded me that life is too short, I started to wonder if I was where I should be. And I remember looking around a those classic big boardrooms that you see on television, where I'm sitting around probably 30 or 40 bankers. And I remember thinking, I don't know that I belong here. And that feeling just started to sit with me and started to bother me. So how do you resolve that? You have New Year's Eve with friends where you drink far too much and you start to talk about and dream about what could we do when we grow up. I ask myself that every year, and I think everybody should. And the idea of La Cuisine just came out. Wouldn't it be a fun business to get people in the kitchen and cook together? And I don't know where that idea came from, to be honest. The only person I can credit is Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know if anybody has read Big Magic. It's a beautiful book. And she talks about the fact, or we don't know if it's a fact, I like to think it's a fact, that ideas are spirits and entities, and they come to you. And it's up to you to give birth to them or not. And if you don't, they go elsewhere. So that is where La Cuisine came from, according to me.
And I think one of the things I really loved about reading the book was you talk a lot about the beauty of not knowing.
Yes.
And in a lot of different points in your life, you've sort of made a leap into something you didn't know. You didn't really know how to speak French, and you weren't, you went from one part of the bank to the other, and now you were, well, I'm going to open a cooking school. Like you really enjoy doing things that are new to you, and that, this whole idea of not knowing what you're doing and being able to ask stupid questions or
absolutely
is part of your success.
Yes, yes. And I'll say that to anybody who has that project that they want to get going on and they feel like they don't have enough information. If I had spent years data mining and looking at, should I run and start a business in France?
As an
American, do you think I ever would have started it? No, sometimes you have to leap in. And I can tell you that not knowing all the answers and being okay with that has been my secret sauce. Because I have some wonderful French colleagues. Maybe they take pity on me or they have fun watching me flounder a bit sometimes. But because I don't have an apprehension about not needing to appear that I should know, I can ask the stupid questions. I can ose a bit more to get in and be nosy and connect with people that maybe had I have known more, I shouldn't have. So the next time you don't know something, think about what a precious that gift is, that you can now study something completely new with childlike curiosity. We don't get those opportunities as often as we should.
So you leave the bank. She didn't keep her job at the bank and start the cooking school.
Just to be clear.
You left the bank.
Yes, left the bank.
And that was probably a tough
That was a
moment.
Long, tough moment. Yes, yes.
And lo and behold, you have a cooking school. And
just like that.
And you run into a few little hiccups with the first location.
Yes.
Including deciding to become best friends with the cat of the concierge.
Yes. If you live in a Parisian building and there is a concierge there, they are king or queen of the neighborhood, and they make your life better or not. So I tried to befriend the concierge at our first location, and she had a cat, which you'll read about. Even though I was allergic, I set my sights on to, if the cat likes me, she's got to warm up to me.
To be continued.
To be continued. I'll let you.
But you ended up in an incredible location.
Yes.
On the banks of the Seine.
Yes.
It was sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's a block and a half from the Hotel de Ville on the quai de l'Hotel de Ville.
Yes. This lovely lady has been there, so she can.
Yay! And it was a former nightclub.
It was a former nightclub. Again, some of the biggest tragedies will be blessings if you can see it through. Our first location was not appropriate for us for a number of reasons. You'll discover that. And then this other location that came up that was a nightclub on the quai, and QUAI means it's next to the Seine. And I thought, well, what on earth am I going to do trying to convert a nightclub into kitchens?
Yeah.
But it ended up being the best thing that happened, that we had to move.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
the business this is now 15 years.
15
You've had La
years.
Cuisine.
Yeah.
And you have 10 to 12,000 people a year coming
Yes.
through the space, all
Yes.
English speaking classes,
Yes.
market tours, dinners,
Pastry tours.
all sorts of amazing courses there. And they continue to evolve, and you continue. There are a couple of things. I mean, you talk a lot about how you're really in the business of memories. Yes, there's all these amazing classes, but memories are your DNA. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your thinking there.
I learned that early on, and again, this is my opinion. We are very much in the business of memories. Most of the people that join us for our experiences, they're 3 to 4 hours in length. So they hopefully understand they're not going to get the same rigorous professional training of the chef that's delivering the class. So a lot of people are there to have a Paris experience. And that is crucial to how our team deliver things, to make people feel included. I think food might be the one last thing we can all agree on, sadly. So let's take that and try to hold it dear and share it, and not use food, for heaven's sakes, to divide us or say who's better or who's more sophisticated. Food is meant to be a moment of sharing experience, of having people teleport themselves, of time for discussion. You know, it's a sacred moment in France, which I love, and I think it should be a sacred moment for all of us.
And the food community in France has really become a part of your community as well.
Yes.
On Jane's Instagram, La Cuisine's Instagram is incredible, and it's La Cuisine Paris is the Instagram, but you are constantly sharing the stories of the people taking your classes, but also all the different artisans in Paris and in France, the winemakers, the cheese makers, the markets. It's all there. What are some of the things about the ouvrier, the artisans in Paris, and some of the merchants you work with, like de Helleran, which is
Yes.
an incredible housewares shop there that you have become very close with. Like, tell us a little about how those relationships evolved, because they took time too.
Over time.
Yeah.
And probably me pestering them so much that they finally gave in. And some of them were just blessings. Mr. de Helleran, who is I believe he's the 5th generation grandson of the original owner. E. de Helleran was founded 1820. It's one of, it's just a landmark. And I had a friend who worked in food who introduced me to Mr. de Helleran. And that introduction was priceless. And that's something when you experience wanting to do business or meet people in France, them being able to have an anchor of who you are and where you come from is quite important. So thanks to that introduction, I've been working with Mr. de Helleran for 15 years. He is an extraordinary man. He loves artisans. I think he loves rolling pins more than he loves people. But I adore him for that. And the one thing I do love about France is not Paris. France is not Paris at all. I love Paris. It's a beautiful city. But when you get outside of Paris, you see how rich and how extraordinary France is. The products, the wines, the cheeses, the meats, the oysters. You know, France is really an incredible country where you get to just taste your way through so many different flavor profiles.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's those people that make up France.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also another area of relationships that I think were fascinating to me in the book, and just learning about are the culinary community of chefs, and some of them also Americans in Paris who are really
Absolutely.
part of your world as well. But David Lebovitz and Dory Greenspan and some of the other chefs that have really made their names, not
Yes.
just in the US, but also there.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's really, really exciting. So tell us a little more about the book. Who is it for? Who do you think will enjoy it? It's not a cookbook. There are no recipes in it. The ingredients in this book are really the ingredients for a great life in France.
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about the book and why you decided to write it and all of that.
So COVID left me with a little time on my hands. In food and tourism, it was a very challenging place all over the world. We were closed for pretty much 18 months. So I started to imagine what I could do to keep my mind occupied. And there were a couple of business projects that I worked on, but I thought, you know, I always had the idea to share a book about doing business in France. And two dear people to me who are writers said, Jane, nobody's going to buy that book but your mother. And maybe the friend that feels bad for you. But if you're willing to share your experience of doing business in France, that might be interesting to a few people. So try that angle, which was very challenging for me. If you look at the history of La Cuisine over the past 15 years, you will really have to scrape very deeply to find me. And I did that purposefully because La Cuisine is a kitchen for the people that come there. It's not Jane's kitchen, it's theirs. And I wanted that to be very clear.
And to that point, you're not a chef.
I'm not a chef.
I mean, you cook and you cook well, but your role in the school is not teaching the
Yes.
classes. So tell us a little more about the teachers and how you found them and some of the ways that the personality of the experience is really, they're really helping to build those memories.
Absolutely. I am so lucky to sit here today with such an amazing team. And they are who people think of when they think of La Cuisine. It's not me, and I'm quite proud of that. Most of our team members come from a school called Grégoire Ferrandi. It's a top culinary institution in Paris. And at this point, 15 years later, I will really only take recommendations for a new team member from our current team members, because it's so important that people understand what we try to deliver. And again, when you're delivering memories, that is a very, very big, broad topic, because each of us wants something different out of that experience. So that's super important. And I've had a wonderful team for years, and we love to add to them when we can, but maintaining the core of how we deliver our classes is what's most important.
Fabulous. Now you have families taking classes as well as individuals, right?
I do, and I can tell you how long a family has been traveling together the moment they walk in the door. And it's precious. You know, there's some fun stories about families, and one of my favorite expression I heard, because there were two sisters traveling together with their husbands and their children. Yes, it was quite a moment. I said, take all the knives out of the kitchen. No. One of them says to the other, your life must be so boring because you already know everything. And I thought, that is the most fabulous. I couldn't say it to her, but I wanted to say, hold on, let me write that down. I love that. But I'm so honored when families come to us, again, not because they're going to go home and create croissants. I really hope they do, because that's a fun activity. But they're leaving with that special experience of having done croissants or macarons or visited the market in Paris with a chef.
Yeah. And they left together, and
they
were
left
okay.
alive together.
Well, I think well, a couple of things. We want to leave time for questions. So
Yes,
we're going to get to
please.
that in a second, but I think you wanted to share a passage from the book. Would everybody like to hear Jane read a little something from the book?
So it's just a very, very small one. And I chose this passage because I was talking to a gentleman who was kind enough to read my book, and he gave me a blurb for it. You can read his blurb on the back. And he said, Jane, you were really honest about Paris. And I don't know that people will like that. They're going to think that you were tough on Paris. And I said, well, you know what? Paris was tough on me. So back at her. But I also said, when you know something or someone so intimately, you can see their blemishes, but you still love them for it. So that's my view of Paris. Okay. I once stood gobsmacked on a street watching a group of 5-year-olds holding hands with their teachers, walking in a mini protest. Yellow vests and all. This time protesting about the need to save the planet. I could just imagine Instagram's post from proud parents announcing Philippe's first manifestation. Each time I see one of these school groups, half of me stands there in dismay. Half of me stands there in complete awe. What a beautiful thing to make sure from the youngest age, you don't just sit back and commit, but you commit to getting out there and exercising your voice for change. I've thought a lot recently about the retirement age battle and what it says about me and what it says about the country that's taken me in. Despite what headlines might suggest, the Parisians I know personally and professionally work incredibly hard. And still they dedicate meaningful time and care to joie de vivre. Even if it's just drinking a coffee slowly out of a porcelain cup. And so it follows that French workers care passionately about having enough retirement time to enjoy years of leisure they feel they deserve. They will protest for that right. They will rage for that right. They will strike for that right. And while the strikes will always make me crazy, I've begun to understand the importance of holding space, literally and metaphorically, for all those conflicting ideas.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and
Well,
ideas
thank
in your
you.
book with us today. And I think now we can open this up to questions and answers.
We have one here. And one in the back.
Let's whisper if there's a question. OK, nous avons une question, madame.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I worked for a French company for quite a few years in this fast. One of my French colleagues said, "We can't hear you."
Okay, okay.
Sorry. Yes.
My name is Lily. I thank you very much for sharing your experience. I used to work for a French company, so I used to go there every 5 weeks. Love Paris and my colleagues. But one of my French colleagues said that to me. He said, American is like a peach and French is like a coconut. So the American is easy to get in, but there's a hard core. And French is hard to get into it, but once you get in,
It's
it's
the
very
soft
soft and warm.
Yes.
So it was fascinating, that comment. So I just wonder what you thought of that. And the other thing is, the other question is, what does Jean-Paul think of your book?
Well, it's just come out. Let me answer the second part of the question. He's not read it. I hope he recognizes himself. I hope he recognizes how dear he was to me. And if it were not for him, there would have been no Paris and there would have been no La Cuisine. So he's incredibly important to me. But I do agree with you. Americans are peaches. And well, you'll hopefully read the passage. I compare Americans to leaves and French to feathers. So you'll see if that resonates with you.
Thank you. I think we have
Yeah.
another question.
Thank you so much for the lecture. Fantastic. Très, très bien. And I just want to share something very quickly. Regardless of age, you can be a teenager, middle-aged, or older. If you are new in Paris, if vous êtes nouveau à Paris, en France, trust me, you go to l'Alliance Française and you make friends, not only from the United States, from all over the world. Even if you're fluent in French, you take a class and you will meet people from all over the world and you will make friends and connections. I don't know if it's still Georges Pompidou is still there. If you go there, you can make friends. There is also the German Institute, the Ghent Institute, the Italian Institute, Japanese, Brazilian, and trust me, you can make tons of friends. Merci.
There you go.
Merci, merci, merci.
Move on over and join the Alliance Française.
No, but you know what? Just one thing. You learn French here before you go, not at the Alliance Française de Paris. Here.
Ah oui.
Okay, we get a question all the way to the back and we get a microphone. Great.
Yes, we
go.
have a microphone. Yes. Thank you for writing this book, but most importantly, thank you so much for sharing the story of your vulnerability and your courage to take a chance. That's wonderful. And by the way, Parisians, they're the only place where they had to give them a lesson on how to smile. The rest of France is full of people who smile all the time. But remember when they had the smile campaign?
Yes.
Well, bon.
Didn't work.
The question, it didn't work. C'est la même chose. Okay,
Yeah.
d'accord. But the question I'm wondering with La Cuisine, because as you say, food is the one thing that we all cannot do without. I mean, we
Yes.
need air, we need food. It's not the only thing, but one of the main things. When you talk about food bringing us together, have you used La Cuisine in a specific attempt to maybe have tables of discussion beyond the cooking, but to have topics that you can talk about? Have you taken it to that level to do a deliberate, how do we see, come to a understanding of different perspectives and diverse thoughts and processes that people are going through as they go through the process of learning about food
Right,
differently than they normally would?
right. You know what? I haven't. And
Let's do that. I think I would work with you on a project to add that, because I think that could be a way to bridge some of
Yes.
the divisiveness that we have in the
Yes,
world right
yes.
now
You know
over
what?
food.
I love that. That's such a beautiful idea. And I've thought about it and I've thought how to execute that properly. And I take note from what I see happening in our classes, where we are privileged to have people from all over the world. We have a family from Ohio standing next to somebody from Morocco, standing next to somebody from Kuwait, somebody from Germany, somebody from Dublin. And I think if the smallest of thing they've experienced is that we are us for that 3 hours, it's beautiful. So I take your point, and if I can find a way to enhance that even more, I'd love to. I can tell you that there have been times when, sadly, we have forbidden people about talking about anything but butter in the school.
Butter,
We
it
had
can
to-
lead to weird conversation too.
Yes.
Last tango in Paris.
Because unfortunately, it's a good topic, but unfortunately, we've seen such a sad moment where people cannot even discuss in a safe environment.
Oh, wow.
So I love your idea, and when I can get the right atmosphere and the right table to host that, I certainly will. You're quite right. That's where we come together.
And this, thank you for pointing this out.
Yes.
This is a really French value, to bien manger, bien vivre, et vivre ensemble. So you eat well, you live well, and you live together. And it's around the table that even children start, because they take time to eat together, which we don't do enough in the States, right? To start to hear discussion, to hear civilized discussion. It's shaded. People don't agree, but there's a way to talk, to argue, to be together. So it is really, I hope, still a French value.
I think so.
Any more? Okay, we got Monsieur.
Yes, Monsieur.
Hi, my name is Peter, and thank you again for giving your talk. It's really, really cool to hear your experience. And so I had a question about especially the idea of dealing with cuisine and food in France and in Paris, because I think there's a big stereotype that the French really value doing their food correctly and doing it the right way. And so my question is, what was your biggest hurdle or challenge, and kind of how do you go about still kind of solving issues like kind of along that line of dealing with, you know, kind of the sensitive issue of cuisine and the sensitivity around
Doing it your
doing
way.
it right.
as
Yeah,
opposed to the
yeah,
way.
right.
Okay. Oh, goodness. There's so many ways to answer that question. Thank you for that. I'd say the first challenge we have is to make people feel confident and to make them feel good and ownership of creating a meal together. And that's a big challenge when you're dealing with, let's say, French chefs who are they have personalities. And I will tell you, I've met lots of different chefs that were incredible technicians and have come from top restaurants, but they couldn't share and they couldn't teach. The professional kitchen is not necessarily a breeding ground for patience. That's a challenge. And then again, another big challenge is seasonality. We love that about France. But when you're visiting, sometimes you want to have a classic like soup à l'oignon. That's not necessarily a summer dish to most French people. So there's all these conflicts that we try to respond to and create experiences around. And that's with being respectful to the team so they feel good about what they're doing, and being respectful to the clients who want to have a wonderful experience. And usually it works out well. So.
Well, while people think about their question, I got one for you, because I really thought you'd dig more, a little bit more. Maybe you can now. I don't know if you do in the book, because you went from banking to a school.
Yes.
So what was the business plan? Where did you get the money? All that work.
Okay.
I want to do the same. I want to compete.
There we go.
I'm retiring. I'm ready.
So first thing I will say is, if there's anything you take away from the book, please take away that anyone can do anything. Because if this person from Chicago sitting here in front of you has dared to open a French cooking school and stumbled my way through many years, anything can be done. So in France, how did I open the school? I did have a business plan. I will tell you, I think most business plans are really only fit for the circular file, which I call the poubelle or the trash. But what does a business plan show? It shows that you can be thoughtful. It shows that you can do some sort of analysis around what are your costs, who are your clients, and how are you going to pay your bills. But don't let a business plan set you back. I also was very prudent. I saved money for years. So I used a lot of my money to invest in fitting out the cuisines. There are no investors.
No investor, no board, nothing. This you own.
It's
Bravo.
for better or worse.
Exactly.
It's my
With the
own.
risk that comes
Yes,
with being on
yes.
your own.
Yes, exactly.
But obviously your acumen from a business school must have been a plus.
You know what? The biggest plus for me, the one thing that I really learned from time in corporate America was not the financial part. That's very important, but relationships. That's always been important even here in the US and the companies I worked in, and then seeing how important that is in France helped me. But that was the most important thing.
No, admiration, because to do construction renovation in France in a building, it's just
And I
like...
still have hair on my head.
Bon, ici, oui, c'est proche.
I'm just curious because I know it's very hard in some of the foreign countries for an American to be allowed to start a business. How are you able to do that in Paris?
I did not. Okay, so I do have European citizenship.
Okay,
Ah,
that's
okay.
different.
That's a big part of the story as well. You have to have, just like if somebody coming from Europe cannot just come here
Right.
without the right to do so. Absolutely. But from what I understand, there's more and more flexibility around that. There's artist visas, there's people who work remotely. But yes, if you want to have a brick and mortar and you want to hire people and you want to stay and live and be a viable part of the community, then you do need to have working rights.
thank you. Important point.
So
Yeah.
which nationality, German or Italian?
No, I actually, because I lived in London for so many years, I applied for British citizenship, which I thought I was set forever. And then Brexit. But now I do have what is called a carte de séjour.
Oh,
I've-
très important.
I have not gone down the path of the dossier to get my French citizenship, but I will. I'm sorry? Pas encore, but it's daunting, but I will do it.
Did we have a question there? I feel, yeah, madam.
I have a lot of questions, but thank you for sharing your story with us. And I visited your cooking school about 10 years ago
Oh
and
my
took a
God.
class, and I've been getting your email ever since. And it is an amazing newsletter, like monthly newsletter, comes out on the first of the month without fail.
And don't ever tell me how many grammar errors. and
Oh my
mistakes
God.
there are.
I am not Jean-Pierre or Jean-Paul or whoever. I'm like, I love it. It's beautiful. But I'm curious, you mentioned your school was closed for about 18 months during COVID.
Mhm.
Have things returned to normal levels as far as tourism and attendance in the school? And
Yes.
then has anything about attending a class changed other than, of course, like germs or, the
Right.
things we learned during
Um,
COVID?
Things are back up and running. Last year was actually one of our strongest years.
Oh, that's great.
But that's pent up tourism. That's nothing special that we've done. That's a lot of people who are wanting to return, and Paris is a top destination. So in terms of classes, we went as quickly as we could back to what we do best. So we've not changed the format of the classes because we know that that's what our clients want. So as long as they feel comfortable, we feel comfortable. So
Yeah.
of course we had that awkward 6-8 months for quite a while as we got readjusted, but now things are, hopefully you'll see it's as it was 10 years ago.
Awesome. I cannot wait to come back.
Good.
Just another
Thank you.
point on that too, that all of your business growth has been through word of mouth. You don't advertise, you don't do some of the more traditional kinds of promotion. It's really a business that's been built
Yes.
word of mouth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, for our small size, I don't think anybody cares what the heck I say about the business. I think they care what people who have visited us say. So that's what we rely on. So, of course, if people share on social media, that's important, or if they write reviews. I found that advertising for us was just very ineffective. So,
Interesting. Just before Sharon asks her question, mine is really quick.
yes.
So what's your favorite French restaurant in Paris?
I get this question a lot,
Sorry.
as you can imagine. So I've got a very long-winded answer.
Oh,
And now you're all are just going to have to sit and listen.
Oh, sorry, Sharon.
It will depend on the season.
Oh, okay.
It will depend on who I'm with. It will depend on what type of experience I want. And I know that we have all these very sexy restaurants in the New York Times now. And I know that we've got all of these fun, new, inventive chefs, which I love. But I will tell you, my favorite restaurant will always be the Bistrot du Coin, your local small bistro that's on your corner, that's been there for years, that's probably most likely family run, that's working very hard to compete in a difficult city. That will always be my preference for a restaurant.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, well, my question is very simple. Do you have anything special planned during the Olympics, or are you just going to shut the door so that no one can, the crazy Americans won't kill you?
Basically, are you closing during
Yeah.
the Olympics?
Yeah, well, I don't know. We are planning to be open. The Olympics is always a very particular period for cities. I have never lived that before. I'm trying to understand what the visitors who are coming for that period want. I can tell you that most just tourism activity, when you travel, you have an activity for the day and then you have free time. You don't usually do activity. And the Olympics is quite consuming of people. So will they then still want their downtime to be with us? Yet to be determined. We're not overrun with reservations. We have a few, but I'm going to wait a bit more to kind of see how to handle that. I'd love to be open, but we're also very close to Hotel de Ville, as you know, and that is potentially a security perimeter that could cause us difficulty. So as we get closer, everybody in our neighborhood's getting very nervous as to how that's what's going to happen.
Okay, let's take just one last question if there's one, and then we can keep the conversation going with a glass of wine and French wine, of course.
Was that Edna? Oh my God, I thought that was you.
Hi, Jane. It's
Hello.
Edna. I'm good. How are you? I was just wondering, because I've been seeing you since 2013 or 2012. What's next for La Cuisine and for you, 10, 15, 20 years, we're still going to see you in Paris?
Oh my. Well, that's a deep one. La Cuisine, in the life of any business and ourselves, homeostasis is a flat line. We always have to challenge ourselves to do something different. You can always learn a language at any age. You can always take up drawing. You can always expand yourself. Businesses are the same. I have to look at expanding La Cuisine if she wants to grow and keep herself fresh. And we did just on March 29th, finally negotiate to take on the space next door to us. So that's breaking news. I've not even said that publicly. So perhaps that will be the second book, renovating that space. Not as fun as renovating a nightclub, I'll tell you.
Well, you'll need a second pandemic to write it.
Oh God, don't say that. Oh man, my God. And for me, who knows? I am so enjoying being out just running my mouth all the time with doing things like this. Not that I can make a living of just that, but who knows?
A
We'll see.
publishing house.
Maybe I'll start a
Cookbooks.
publishing house.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you. Thank you,
I wanna
Jane,
thank all
for
of you.
sharing this with us. Thank you to Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks to all of you. And also, of course, to our team for helping us run this event without an itch, but really with people, I guess, like Jane and Nina, it makes it easy. Remember to come back. I saw many of you grab our little symposium booklet because now I'm not able to remember the name of the guest, but there's fantastic program on Yves Saint Laurent. One of the guests is the curator at the Metropolitan Museum in New York at the Costume Institute. The other, as I say, is the head. He's very famous. He's the head of the Yves Saint Laurent Fondation since Pierre Berger has passed. So really, really good stuff coming up. All about Paris, all about fashion, about foods. We love it. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
That was wonderful.